Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of the Arc of Thoughts podcast. In today's episode, Kasim, we're talking about marriage within our community, um, maybe preparing for marriage, how to look for a suitable spouse, the kind of things that we should be doing, as well as some tips and advice that we might have.
Are you looking for a second one?
No, no. You've been waiting to pull this joke, haven't you? No, I'm not looking for the second one. I'm happy with the one, and inshallah, that's the way that it stays, and me and my wife stay happy. Alhamdulillah. You probably put me on the spot there. I might be blushing a bit now, guys, as well. But anyway, right.
His missus is gonna watch this from the beginning to the
end. Yeah, and so she should, innit? If she's got any advice for me as well, then alhamdulillah, I'm happy to listen and accept criticism. But yeah, let's get cracking, Kasim. Let's move on. Okay, so before we start, as usual, please do like the video.
Honestly, it really helps with the likes and stuff. It really goes a long way, man.
Yeah. Subscribe to stay up to date with all the videos that we post. And if you've got any comments about anything that you think is important to share in this particular topic, then feel free to leave a comment down below as well. So let's begin, Kasim. Firstly, like the purpose and the goal of marriage. I'll start on this one. So in terms of like the purpose and the goals of marriage, the advice that I'll mention here is the advice that I was given when I got married. So the sheikh who conducted my nikah ceremony, he mentioned within the short talk that he gave beforehand, he mentioned three main things, if I remember correctly. First and foremost thing is, as with anything, with any action that we do as Muslims, our primary goal, our primary purpose should always be to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether that be getting married or whether that be tying a shoelace, for example, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be first and foremost within our mind. So when we get married, it's the same thing, that I'm getting married to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doesn't mean that that's the only objective of getting married. No, but this should be the primary focus. Second thing is that we are fulfilling the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to get married, and I think I want to make a very small point here about sometimes in other cultures, or sorry, in other religions, is deemed not liked, or it's seen as something negative to get married. So for example, I'll give the example of like Buddhist monks or even like Christian monks who see it as not getting married as a sign of piety. In Islam, I don't think that exists. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to get married, and it was the sunnah of all the prophets, well, nearly all of the prophets as well, that they all got married. And I think it's not a sign of piety to stay away from marriage. Yeah, I would say it's a sign of piety to get married and to continue in your life's journey.
Just like a sign that, don't get me wrong, there were some scholars who didn't get married, but these are exceptions.
Yeah.
These were very special people.
Yeah.
1 in a million people.
Yeah. And the final actually purpose of getting married is, at the end of the day, we get married and we procreate. And one of the purposes or the outcomes of marriage is to increase the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. That we take pride in being Muslims, and we want there to be a majority of Muslims as well. No harm in that. No harm in saying that. No shame in saying that as well. And we want to increase the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. So this is also what can be seen as like a purpose or a goal of marriage as well. Them are the three pieces of advice that was given to me. I don't know, Kasim, like, are there anything else that you want to mention here in terms of like?
Just the last thing that you mentioned, like today, like we live in such a world, like such a globalized world, as well as become such a small place. Is that it's almost seen like as a bad thing to have kids, and people are delaying like the ability to have kids to such a late age. It's unbelievable. Why? Because they're focusing on other things. And you probably could tell us, like you become a father recently, that the pleasure that your son gives to you is like no amount of money or anything else could ever do that. Just his smile or just him, playing with you and stuff like that. And the thing is, people don't understand this. And I remember one of the scholars he mentioning that Allah, he he gives sustenance to people in different ways, and he goes the lowest level of sustenance is actually money. Because after that is marriage and kids, and he goes, these are other forms of sustenance that people don't understand. You know, like you would never trade your son for anything, would you?
Yeah. I think so. To be honest, you mentioning this reminds me about something as well, that I just want to mention. So I think one of the things you're mentioning about, like, having a child, and don't get me wrong, it comes with its challenges as well. It's not easy. You need to prepare yourself both mentally. You need to prepare yourself. Now, so there's a sort of misconception that exists, and I want to mention this as a particular point. Okay, delaying children for the sake of your wealth decreasing is something that shouldn't be done in Islam, because our viewpoint is your risk and your sustenance, and we're talking about the lowest level in terms of money, comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as is everything else as well. And we say that a child comes with its own sustenance, and therefore the parents shouldn't worry about the sustenance of the child. That shouldn't be the reason why you delay in terms of having children. um, Again, we're not putting out like fatwas, or we're not giving verdicts or anything, but we're teaching a general principle. Okay, and this is a principle that I've held on to, that I did not delay in having a child for this reason. Okay, there may be other reasons, but for this primary reason you shouldn't. And inshallah I'll mention like a personal story, which inshallah will be a source of motivation. Now, I can guarantee. I've heard this from other people as well, but and I know that for me, it gave me like a source of like belief inside of my heart as well. So I know that it happened to other people as well. But at the time that my child was on the way, alhamdulillah, I ended up getting an increase in terms of my salary as well, and that's that can be seen as a source of barakah. We do normally say that barakah is whatever that you have that is sufficient for your sustenance, okay, and that suffices, and that's normally barakah. But also, you can also say that an increase is also barakah as well. So yeah, so like my salary went up, and that covers the expenditure of my child. Alhamdulillah,
Because
and
he eats a lot.
yeah.
Mashallah.
They go through a lot of nappies, and they go through a lot of wipes, and if you're got children on the way, or you already have children, you already know anyway, so you don't need me to tell you. But yeah, like this thing, getting this misconception out of your head, like and it's difficult sometimes. It's really difficult topic to talk about, and this is why, like, I don't want to dwell too much into it. But I've just mentioned the point, inshallah, and hopefully to those who it's a source of benefit for, I've also mentioned my personal story and how like our risk increased. And inshallah that the same happens for you, and that can be a source of like goodness for you as well. Second thing that I'll mention is, you mentioned about like the family unit getting smaller and smaller within current society, and it's funny because the scholar that did Manika, he mentioned the thing as well. He said this society has now become ke hum do or hamare do. So that's a Urdu saying, hum do or hamare do. Us two and our two. We shouldn't put limitations on these kind of things as well. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined for us, decreed for us, inshallah, will come our way. Um, and I think there was one more thing that I wanted to mention, but it sort of like skipped my mind. Oh yeah. What I wanted to mention, the other thing I wanted to mention is that, for me, the vision is that when my child grows up, and when my children, inshallah, that are to come, hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with more as well,
Ameen.
that when they come to a point where, they're playing, and, we go outside in the garden to play, or we go to the park to play, or, we go out in different activities, I don't want to be the kind of dad where, crooked back and, hobbling along and, sorry, I'm playing badminton with you, but I can only play like a couple of rallies and that's it. My vision, and I see it in like some of the people in the older community, and mashallah, they're active with their children, man. Like they're going for bike rides with their children, they're engaging in sports with their children, not just taking them to places, they're actively involved with them. And that's a whole different ball game, when you can turn around and say, you played with your father, right? And that's what I want to be able to do. Now, hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me the health to be able to do that. I can't guarantee that at this age, but I'm putting myself in a position where I can. And I think that's the thing. So I think the next thing we want to mention, like some books to sort of assist us in terms of getting married or preparing for marriage, or if somebody's married already, then these books are helpful as well. Sometimes we think about marriage books that have been written as only for those people who are seeking marriage. I think that's incorrect. Because you might not have read it in the time when you were seeking marriage, but it's definitely going to be a benefit for you during your marriage as well. So I'll just mention three books. I've got them with me as well, alhamdulillah. I used one of them. Sorry, I used two of them. The other one hadn't been written at the time, which I picked up later. So the first one is one that's very well known. It's called Usher's Blessings in Marriage. I don't know if it can be seen properly on camera, but yeah, it's a very famous book. If we can, we'll leave like an Amazon link in the description. The second book that to mention here would be the Healthy Muslim Marriage book. This is written by Mufti Abdul Rahman Mangera, who resides in London. It's written by a scholar of our time in our community.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to mention. Whilst the first book is really, really helpful, don't get me wrong, and has some fantastic points, but sometimes it might miss in terms of like the societal complex. Whereas this book hits them points and gets them points a bit more clearly. It also talks about like preparing for marriage, which some other books don't mention in particular, as in like the kind of things that we should do and be involved in before we get married. And the final thing I just want to point towards, I don't want to spend any extra time on because that's not really
and there's a reason we're mentioning
what we're here for. But marriage obviously comes with intimacy as well, and it's important that we understand the laws of intimacy or the manners of intimacy and the principles of intimacy as well. So alhamdulillah, we're really lucky that another scholar who resides in Leicester, Mufti Muhammad ibn Adam, he's written a fantastic book about intimacy and the Islamic Guide to Sexual Relations. So that's another book that I'd really recommend that you all get, and you keep that as a point of reference for yourself as well. So Katim, let's move on. We mentioned some books. What I want to talk about to continue the conversation now is the social pressures that are around marriage, and the sort of expectations that come along with it as well. What are your thoughts about like these kind of pressures that exist and the expectations?
I think talk of our generation. I think it's been quite difficult, and it's going to get more difficult as time goes on. The reason is one problem that I've seen is that some parents or most parents don't actually talk to their children about marriage, and they don't even mention them until the age of 23, and they're like, okay, when you get married. It's like marriage it's not something that you just think about overnight. It's an idea, or it's something that you have to give thought to. And you can't be expected to get married in a week or in a month or in 6 months. It's a process of time, of thinking, of understanding what you want, where your direction of life is going. So for me, I see that there's a lot of youth, for example, going to university, getting their degrees and careers, and then suddenly the bomb of marriage is dropped on them, and they don't know how to deal with it because they don't know how to juggle everything. And for me, I think this needs to be talked about more from a younger age. I think after the age of puberty, 16, 17, 18, the idea needs to be implanted so people are thinking about these things. Because in our society today, like, let's be honest, youth are not even thinking about marriage. Why? Because there's unfortunately other avenues out there which is just open to fulfill person's desires. And just a disclaimer, marriage is just not about fulfilling your desires. Yeah, that's one part of marriage, but that's not the entirety of marriage. You don't get married for that sole reason. And this is where there's a problem. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Marriage is not just like a channel or an avenue to satisfy your desires. It's a whole lot more. It's about becoming like a partner with somebody and growing together. Like as well as all the other things that we mentioned previously already. See, the thing is, you're mentioning that a child or a young adult after the age of puberty should start to hear about marriage. And the thing is that comes with problems, because the thing is, when you sort of approach the topic of marriage with some people who aren't mature enough to talk about it, the thing is their thought process is that my parent or my guardian is looking to get me married off as soon as possible. And I know that it's a bit naive to think like that, but I think that's like quite common. That if you approach the subject of marriage before like coming from a parent or a guardian, then it can have the wrong sort of consequences. I think that rather than the parent or the guardian, it needs to come from maybe some other authority, So, like for example, let's say the imam talks about these kind of things in terms of the khutbahs or the talks that they give you. I'm not saying like every month there's a talk that takes place on marriage, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
But like ultimately, like if you go to other societies, like uh, they will tell the girls or the women that inshallah by the age of 18, 20, you'll be married.
mhm,
Meaning that the girl, she has an idea that okay, by this age, hopefully I'll be getting married. She'll be preparing herself for that sort of age.
mm.
When you delay it so long, like the sort of child or the boy or the girl doesn't have any idea. This way it becomes a problem.
Yeah, but
You need to. I personally think you need to mention the idea that one day you'll get married, inshallah.
mm,
You know, and it's something that they will look forward to.
yeah. So I think like it definitely. So I think we're both going down a somewhat a similar line, but slightly different. Okay, so it requires tact from the parent and the guardian to
Yeah.
be able to phrase it in the correct manner, right? If the parent or the guardian doesn't have that sort of tact or doesn't have that sort of wisdom to be able to bring the conversation up like that, I think they shouldn't.
Oh
Because the
no.
thing is, if you don't have the ability to communicate like that with your child,
Well, if
and you don't have a relationship like
that's the
that,
thing. That's the best thing.
then
If you have a relationship with your child,
yeah, then
yeah.
you shouldn't be bringing up a conversation like that because you're putting on undue pressure. I think the other thing is, especially in this day and age, this might be a bit controversial and stuff, but in this day and age, I don't think like we should be putting like an age restriction that by this particular age you need to be married, because the problem is that
No, okay, kind of sorry.
yeah. So the problem is that there are so many people who just aren't ready for it, who just aren't mature enough for it,
But
right?
why? Why are they not? This is a question that I'm gonna get to now. Why are they not mature? I know it might be sidetracking, but
Hmm.
why are they not mature?
I mean, I don't want to say it from the obvious that they just aren't, but
But the thing is, do we think when they're not mature? Do we treat them as if they're not mature?
that's a really interesting point there. Because there is that aspect of if you treat somebody as an adult, then they automatically assume that responsibility and become more prepared. But the problem is, I think like now it's so common that people see it where you know marriages break down because it was very very clear that the other person just wasn't ready, you know. Um, and
I understand that, but that comes from a deeper problem of not giving your child responsibility or making him mature.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying, though, isn't it? So let's take for an example, like a child isn't ready, right? But he's forced into a situation because he believes that by X particular age I've got to be married. Then the opposite, the person that they eventually get married to, in most cases that person is ready, right? And all of a sudden you end up with this mismatch between somebody who's mature and somebody who's immature, right? And the marriage breaks down.
I'm not advocating to force anyone to get married,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm saying like you should have put. How do you say you should have put a limit by saying before 23 you can't get married. That's what I'm saying. You
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
put that
yeah.
limit on.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
You
Yeah, so
understand what
fair
I
enough.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't say before 23 is haram or
Yeah, yeah.
21 is haram or what
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's many people, mashallah, they got married, they went to university together.
Mhm.
Or mashallah, after university they got married, and mashallah,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
they didn't go to university, they just got jobs, apprenticeships, or whatever. They work things out, and
Mhm.
mashallah, they got married and they live in their life.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
To be honest, I was advised this. I was advised when I went to university, like get married before you go, or like get married at some point. Look to get married at some point during, not actively go looking around
yeah,
university
yeah.
for a spouse or anything, but like if it happens or something, or like between your parents something happens, then go for it. Bismillah. Um, but yeah, okay. I see this point of yours that we shouldn't put like a lower limit
Yeah.
of you need to hit X particular age. And I think, to be honest, I think this is what you wanted to talk about, actually. So I think I maybe missed your point a bit. But so what you're saying is basically you don't want to set like a lower limit of by this age, sorry, only at this age can you then get married.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm going to like point the direction of the conversation a bit in your way because I know what else you want to mention. So what other things do we limit ourselves in terms of putting a lower limit saying you need this or you need to have achieved X, Y, and Z.
Now the arguments for and against this, but like there's sort of an expectation now that you can't get married until you have your own house.
Mm-hmm.
That's one expectation that some people come with.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is that you don't have like a high paying job.
Okay.
Okay. It's like how do you expect a person in his 20s to be at this level or the economic level of a person who's at the age of 40?
Mm-hmm.
You got to think about the society that you live in. You got to understand everything.
Mm-hmm.
And once you put these limits on, you restrict everybody.
Yeah.
That's why, like, even Muslims now, like, the age of getting married is very, very late.
Okay.
And it's worrying, like, because there's so many people out there who are not married.
Okay.
Because all these limits were put on them.
Okay, so let's break these down, right? Then, so the first thing that you've mentioned is putting a lower limit on age. I think we've already talked about that one, so we can leave that one to one side. The next thing is you've mentioned about having a house. Okay, so let's take for example a person who doesn't have a house, who doesn't own a house, right? What should they do? So I think, like, for me personally, the way that I see it is our parents' generation, alhamdulillah, were very, very fortunate where the ratio between house prices and the average wage of a person, whether they be the average wage of anybody in the UK or the average age of people within our society, who we know is lower than the average of the UK, that ratio was much lower than what it is now.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
and at the moment, house prices are just increasing and increasing and increasing. Right? They're not, the way that I see it personally. I don't see them coming down anytime soon.
No.
So I think we're at the point of transition between where our parents were able to afford houses, and some of them have an expectation that we will be able to afford a house and buy a house outright. And obviously, like, these differences are, there's nuance between geographic locations as well. Where we're based in the northwest, houses are cheaper.
Yeah.
If you go into the Midlands, it's going to be more expensive. You
Most
go down to London, you're already priced out, so they're already
Yeah.
ahead of us in terms of this anyway. Okay, but let's say, for example, a person doesn't own a house, neither can his mum or dad or his parents or her parents provide funds to own a house. How do you go about it? What are your, like, what do you suggest?
You have to rent.
Yeah. So how do you deal with parents who unfortunately have an ideology that you shouldn't rent or you can't rent? Because there are many people who have this.
I know. Unfortunately, it's again, it goes back to the thing of either help your child and prepare them for the life that they're going to live, or just leave them to it and leave them to their devices and means, and they're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah,
it's one of the two. You can't have both. If your parents can't help you, then you're gonna have to figure out another path. Now, we're not even gonna mention mortgages and stuff like that. Forget that. We're not gonna even go into that.
Well, that's the thing going in, like,
yeah. Okay, let's forget that. Okay, so the only viable option is to rent. And a lot of people are renting. I'm like, I know even you rented, mashallah, you know, and Allah opened the ways, and you know things happen, mashallah, you know. But just because you don't have a house doesn't stop you from your money. You can always rent.
Yeah.
You know, you can always figure things out. Have another plan, work for things in the future, and eventually have your own house one day. But that shouldn't stop you from, if you can afford to pay rent, you've got a job, then why not get married?
Okay. And then what if you can't afford to pay rent?
That's the thing. You need to have your sort of income before you get married.
Yeah. So I think, like, we just missed a slight point here as well, is the conversation between renting and not moving out, staying with your parents or your in-laws. Okay. So I met a brother when I was traveling in Malaysia. He was from the UK. He went to Malaysia to go do his dentistry degree. He ended up meeting somebody there, and he got married. And it turned out that his in-laws were dentists as well, and they had a nice home. So he basically moved in with the in-laws, and he basically works as a dentist in his in-laws' practice. So that's all right, and that's not so bad. But yeah, so, like, this is a massive, like, conundrum which happens. Like, in our community, it's more common that, you know, you not moving in with the girls' parents is more common than moving in with the with boys' parents. So there's a real conversation to be had now about living with parents and moving out. Okay, now there's two things here, right? The first thing is, if you are in a situation where you cannot financially provide shelter and a roof over you and your spouse's head, and live out by renting. If you can't, then living with your parents is the only option that you have.
Yeah.
And if you and your wife you and your spouse are serious about this, you can do it. You know, there's no like, there are some people, right, on Muslim Twitter who get really hung up about this, about living with parents and stuff. And some basically turn around and say, no, don't do it, right? By hook, but basically just don't do it, right? And the thing is, there are horror stories. I know there are horror stories. I've heard about them horror stories. I'm well aware of them horror stories. But not every story goes like that. We don't hear about the good sides. We don't hear about the good stories. I know somebody that's been married like 5-6 years, and he's been living with his mom and dad, and like the girl gets along fine with her in-laws, and there are going to be rifts and rafts here and there, right? But
that's gonna
you
happen.
can work through it,
Yeah.
right? And the thing is, if you are in a financial situation where you can't move out, then and it's a viable option and it's open to you and there's space at home, then it's fine, right? So I think like what it essentially comes down to is both the person who is moving out of their parents' home and moving into somebody else's parents' home has to understand that there's going to be an element of sabr, okay? Number two, you're also going to have your privacy. Your privacy is not going to be as complete as it would be under your own roof, okay? And this is a big thing, right? For me, this was one of the big things that I wanted to have privacy for myself and my spouse. I could afford it. That's why I moved out. There also wasn't space at home, unfortunately. So I moved out and I rented, right? These were the things that I went down. But alternatively, I do think that if I was not in that option, right, I know from I'm going to use the Urdu word, mizaj.
What mindset?
Yeah, from the mindset of like my mom and dad, I reckon if we needed to do it and we needed to move in, we could move in. Okay, so I think like as an individual, you have to like assess
your own situation,
right? And you got to be real. You got to take the emotions out of it, and you got to think about it. Okay, well, if my parents, how are they with with other people? And we know, look, this thing about having heroes in our mind are infallible, that never do anything wrong. So we've got to get rid of that understanding.
I'm glad you said that.
And let's be frank, not every one of our parents are amazing people. Okay,
But
they are amazing to us.
Yeah,
they are amazing to us. Okay, and I don't want to like seem like a person that's putting it down or anything like that. But we have to be frank, because we are meddling with somebody else's life and somebody else coming into our house. If we already know that our parents are going to cause a problem about that, and these problems aren't because they're bad people, astaghfirullah. That's not what it is. Normally it's just a clash of like love. When a person gets married, the mum wants to see her son happy and wants to see her son looked after in the same way that she's looked after her. And if she sees something which is untoward, and it might not even be true, it's just like a glimmer of one action, she's going to understand it in a wrong way. And like I said, that's not her fault. That's her love coming through. And sometimes this is where like the rifts begin. This is where the problem begin and stuff. So as a person, you've got to look at your own parents and you've got to judge. Do I reckon my household can hold this?
Yeah.
If they can, and alhamdulillah, you have very understanding parents, then you're very lucky, alhamdulillah, and you may be able to go down this route. Like, I think about like my relationship with my mom and dad. I think like I'm amazed sometimes at like some of the wisdom that my dad has as well. And how frank he is, how he leaves us to ourselves. He doesn't like My dad doesn't meddle unless like we come to him with something. We know that he's there if we need anything, but there isn't like unnecessarily meddling or coming here or coming there or asking us to do it like this or be like that, or there's nothing like that. Very, very open. When we come to our parents' house, very open and loving, accept us in, no like sort of like snide remarks or anything like that. Alhamdulillah, like I've got to say, like I'm really lucky in that sense. Okay, but I know that other people unfortunately aren't in a situation like that. So you have to assess your own situation and then you got to make a decision. Okay, if it's possible to live at home, then do so. There's massive benefit, economical benefit, financial benefit. There's huge benefit in terms of living at home. Obviously, you are going to pay like some stipend or some rent to your parents, right? But it's not going to be the same as actually moving out and having to deal with the bills and everything else. So I think like I've talked about that quite a lot. Okay, so let's shovel that one now. Let's put that to one side. The next thing you mentioned is about like salaries and stuff. So I saw something on Twitter today talking about, can you live off one person's salary for 20,000? Okay, and you've mentioned already beforehand that some people have this thing of they want a 40-year-old salary in a 23, 24-year-old to get married. So go on, I'll let you take it ahead.
I think we're going to be realistic. Depending on who you get married to, what sort of job they have, what occupation they have. I don't know if they have enough money. For example, just if they have enough money to pay rent, to pay the bills, to provide you with what you need and stuff. Alhamdulillah, be happy with that for now. You know, and you can save money every single month, for example. Like, what more do you need, for example? Like, the thing is, if you're gonna get married and you expect your husband to provide you with like the brand, like latest cars and latest jewelry and stuff like that, unfortunately, you got married to the wrong person because you need to look up who you got married to. Yeah, be realistic. If the guy sitting in front of you is not a millionaire and you want a millionaire in life, don't marry him. As simple as that.
I think that's the thing. Like, you got to be frank with yourself. You got to know, like, you got to be able to sit down with yourself and say, you know, what are my expectations? And you can't be like try and make yourself out to be like this fantastic person or something. Be real, right? Sit down with yourself, open a notebook, and sit down and say, like, what do I expect, right? And doesn't matter if that thing is, you know, something you deem to be bad. Like, for example, if you want a holiday every year and you want to go away every year, then write that down. Because if you get married to somebody that cannot offer that to you, then you're going to cause problems about that. Okay. If you expect a certain thing from your wife, or you expect your wife to be in a certain way, or you expect your husband to be in a particular way, and he's not like that, or she's not like that, that's going to cause problems. Okay. You've got to be very like methodical or logical about these kind of things. And maybe that's me talking as a mathematician, but I don't know. Like, that's the way that I see it.
It's going back to think of like why you're getting married, the purpose. Also, like you said, growing as partners. Like, before you get married, you don't get married blindly. You look at the person, you talk to the person. Okay, are they compatible? What's going on in their life? What's going on in my life? Do we match? Or we go in the right direction? Or is it different? And sometimes, like, you might find a person that might be good, might not be compatible. That's fine. You know, don't try to make it work because it's gonna end up breaking. You know, not to say any person, but you just don't fit.
Yeah. So my wife was mentioning about like a couple. I don't know if she knows them or she heard about it from somewhere or something. But it seemed like they were both well off. Their families must have been well off as well. But what they decided was, rather than spend a large amount on the wedding day itself, they basically decided to spend like whatever was enough in terms of spending on the wedding day. But they spent their money traveling together. And I think that's amazing to think about, that they spent their time traveling, bonding, coming together. And that's fantastic, man. That's a really good way to start off your marriage, because you've not invested it on a day to show other people and to show how lavish you are and what your financial might is, so to speak.
You're fine,
yeah. But you spent it in terms of like building your own relationship and, you know, showing who you are and building for the long run, inshallah. And I think that's amazing to think about. And I think that's what we're trying to say, that don't restrict yourself to just one day for other people. Build it for, you know, use your finances or whatever they may be for the sake of your marriage in the long run, so that you build a relationship that inshallah will last a long time. I don't know, what do you think? Like,
just go back to that point. Like, I'm guessing, like, just say they even travel for like a month or 2 months, they probably found out more about themselves or them to us as a couple than most people find out in 2-3 years. Because when you go traveling, like, you see the best and worst of a person. You get to see the reality of a person. Why? Because things are not how they want them. They're not like home. It's not like the luxury has, you know. So you get to see like the good side of what you actually got yourself into.
Yeah.
You know,
I have a friend of mine as well, actually, that he had a thirst for like going to learn knowledge, Dini knowledge, Islamic knowledge. So I don't know like whether his wife also studied as well or whether it was just him, but they had the ability that they basically, because they didn't spend like a large amount on the wedding, like I think even a year after, or a year and a half, 2 years after they got married, he went to Egypt to go study Arabic for a year and took his wife with him, and they lived out there in Egypt. But, you know, having the flexibility to do that was because they hadn't spent a large amount on lavish. They just did what they needed to do, and then they made sure that they saved up. You know, I'm sure they must have talked about it at some point. You know, and I think that's the thing. But yeah, I think this is really important in terms of like getting to know each other as well. Like what your likes are, what your dislikes are, what you want to see in terms of your marriage going forward. You know, what are the things that you might want to achieve together. You know, the worst thing is you're in a situation where you don't have to share the same goals. That's not necessary. No. It's not necessary that you have the same goals, but you have a partner who understands what your goals are, understands its vision, sees the importance of that, and will assist you and be your partner by your side. You know, so many scholars. You know, when you think about the scholars that are like well known within society, that are, whether they are living or whether they passed away, guaranteed that their wife was beside them,
Oh, definitely.
that their spouse was beside them, and they shared the vision, they shared the goal, and they helped in terms of the sacrifice that was needed to do what was right. Even scholars that are within our communities now, you look at their relationship, especially where if they are active, mashallah, is because their spouses are there by their side,
Yeah.
and they see the vision, they have the vision. But yeah, I think like in terms of talking about roles of husbands and wives, Kasim. So I know that Islam outlines like the rights of a wife and the rights of a husband, right? But the way that I personally see them is I see them as guidelines. Um, I don't like. I'm not trying to say that everybody should see them as guidelines and that's it. No, no, no. Because some people need to know this is what my rights are and this is what the rights of the other persons are to fulfill them. Um, if you are struggling in terms of like having clarity about it, then yeah, these are not guidelines. These are what you need to adhere to. But between yourself and your wife, you both need to talk. You need to compromise. You need to have communication between the two of you, in which you talk about like the running of your house, the building of your family. If you aren't able to do that, then it's going to cause a lot of friction. When I say that I see them as guidelines, I see them as guidelines in a sense where between me and my wife, we discuss what we want to do and how we're going to do everything, and then we share accordingly. That might mean I do some of the things which are deemed as what my wife should, and my wife does some of the things that deemed are as what I should. But that's communication at the end of the day. That's how we work in it. That's the thing. Like, and the other thing is like not expecting too much as well.
Yeah.
Don't be like, oh, you have to do this. It has to be like that. No, you've got to compromise in the situation, know how to deal with each other, and talk about it. I don't know what else is there to mention here, Kasim.
Especially with this generation, like if you're a guy and you're gonna get married and you expect your wife to wait on you, like I'm sorry, that's not gonna happen. I don't expect your wife we'll say it straight, but don't expect her to be a slave. Like, she's not there to cook, clean, and wash your clothes, man. She's not somebody that you paid money for to do your. Honestly, it's true, isn't it? That's how some people see it, man. It's like she will be your partner. She should be your friend more than anything else. And you should like both men or women, compromise and just do those things which are going to make your life easier for each other. You want to have a good, healthy relationship.
Yeah, I think this is you mentioned a good point here, which sort of triggers me. You want your wife to be your best friend, right? And this is the thing, like if you are a guy that has like a lifestyle where they constantly are with their friends and stuff like that, when you're looking to get married, you need to learn to bring that in and reel that thing in, man. Married life is not about going to spend nights out with your mates and stuff. Married life is about looking after your wife. It might be that you do get some time with your mates. That's fine. Nobody's saying that don't spend time with your mates and stuff. But everything is within moderation and everything is in its place. You need to make sure that you take care of your wife. You've taken responsibility of your wife. And right now I'm addressing to guys because I am a guy, but the same applies both ways as well. That we take care of each other, and you can't have this thing of like see you later, I'm going or something. Everything has to be in moderation.
And
At the end of the day,
it comes down to maturity.
yeah. To judge what's right to hold on to, what's the right amount of space away from each other, and what's the right amount of time spending together with each other as well. There's no right and wrong answer. Well, there is a wrong answer. The wrong answer is basically you spending only time outside, which is unfortunate. There's so many cases like this where, and normally it tends to be this way, where the women are just left at home with the kids or just left at home by themselves, and the guy's outside chilling with his boys. Out on street corners or God knows where.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think we should call it an end today.
Yeah.
I think before I end, I just need to get some du'as out as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless me in terms of my relationship and stuff.
I mean,
At the end of the day, we have to protect ourselves as well, Kasim. I think I've maybe like shared a couple of things that wouldn't normally, but I just hope that it's of benefit to people. But we also have to protect ourselves from the evil eye and stuff like that. So, please pray for me. I ask that you all pray for me, inshallah. And you pray for Kasim as well, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with long and happy lives in our marriage, grants peace and sukoon inside of our lives, makes our spouses a means of contentment for us and a means of like our heart being full. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us long and happy lives together, long and healthy lives together, grants us the ability to look after each other, take care of each other, in terms of like our emotional needs as well. Yeah, and whoever gives Ameen to my duas, inshallah, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also grants you guys long and happy, prosperous lives in your marriages. Grants you peace and contentment, and that's what it comes down to, Kasim. If you got peace and contentment at home, alhamdulillah, man, you're one of the richest people in the world, man. Forget what anybody says in terms of bank balance and stuff. Yeah, if you can walk into your house and you're happy to walk into your house, wallahi, you're a happy person, man. If you can just do that, yeah, that when you come home, whenever you come home, whether you come from home, from work, or a lot of people are working from home nowadays, right? But when you are in your house, you are content,
Yeah.
right? You don't feel like a fish out of water. Then you're one of the richest people in the world, man. Forget what anybody else says. But yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take care of us, man, inshallah.
Ameen.
Grant us
Ameen.
all khair and ease and afiyah, inshallah.
Ameen.
I hope that whatever we've mentioned, inshallah, is our benefit to people. Jazakallahu khair for listening, inshallah, and we'll see you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.